Kia ora koutou. Welcome to the 2025 Grand Finals of the New Zealand Schools Debating Championships. Shortly, oh, we're missing a team. Please welcome Team Hawke's Bay. Welcome to the 2025, welcome again to the 2025 Grand Finals of the New Zealand Schools Debating Championships. On the affirming, we have Wellington Gold, and on the negating side is Team Hawke's Bay. Both these teams have competed across 7 in-rounds and the semi-finals and shown themselves to be the best debaters in the country. So please join me in congratulating them for making it to the finals. We're very lucky to be able to host these finals in Parliament, and so I'm honoured to invite up Chris Bishop to open up today's events. Chris has been involved with schools debating for over 2 decades now, as a speaker, a coach, a judge, a president, and also as a life member. So please welcome Chris.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Legislative Council Chamber of Parliament for the grand final of 2025 New Zealand Schools Debating Championships. It's a great honour to host you here at Parliament. When I was competing in this competition in the final in the year 2000, which is quite a long time ago now, 25 years ago, the host was Peter Dunn, and he was a long-time lover of debating as well, and it was always my dream to be the host after Peter Dunn. And now I'm able to do that. It's wonderful to have you all here. For those of you wondering where exactly you're sitting, you're seated in the Legislative Council chamber. This is the old house where New Zealand's upper house, the equivalent to the House of Lords or Legislative Council chambers in other parts of the Commonwealth, used to sit. Parliament got rid of the Legislative Council back in 1951, and we just have the lower house, which is to my left and your right. But we retained this beautiful, august building, so it's very appropriate that we are here today. The final of this championships has almost always been held at Parliament, and the reason for that is that Parliament is the home of our democracy, it's the home of free speech, and it is also the home of debating, and I suspect the debating in the final this afternoon will be of higher quality than the debates that you see in the debating chamber just over the way. Obviously, it's been an interesting time in Parliament over the last week or so for those of you who have been following the news, and I'm looking forward to a much higher quality debate here than we've seen perhaps over the last few weeks. This competition is a very important competition. Those of you who've competed throughout the weekend will know what a very enjoyable experience it is, and you'll know the amazing skills that debating teaches you, and I still utilise the skills that this competition gave me each and every day in my life, and some of you might go on to be MPs, some of you may not. There are alumni of this championship, including Jacinda Ardern, Megan Woods, myself, Nicola Willis, people who've gone through this competition who've gone on to become MPs. But many of you won't become MPs, but you will definitely utilise the skills that you've learned through debating in the course of your professional life, whether it's study or whatever you go on to do in the workforce as well. The other thing is that you will remember the people you debated with, and you will remain very firm friends with the people not only in your team but also from the teams that you've been competing against. This is a very special competition, and one of the hallmarks of the competition is that people who've been through it come back as adjudicators, judges, administrators, and everything in between that helps make the competition run. And so I'd encourage you that if you've had a great time this weekend, then please do contribute to give back and become a coach or an adjudicator or an administrator. So thank you for coming to Parliament. It's wonderful to see you all here. Congratulations to both Wellington and Hawke's Bay. I'm a former coach of both Wellington and Hawke's Bay. Obviously competed for Wellington, but I don't have a dog in this fight. May the best team win and enjoy the debate. Thank you.
So those of you who've been competing over the tournament will be very familiar with the rules by now, but speeches are 8 minutes long with POIs between 1 and 7 minutes. So there'll be 1 clap at 1 minute, 1 clap at 7 minutes, and then 2 claps at 8 minutes. The motion today has a very, very long info slide, which I won't read out, But the motion is, this House supports Harvard's refusal to comply with Trump's demands. So hopefully none of our speakers are planning to go to American unis next year, because might not want that live stream staying up online. Let us know. And with all that said, I'd like to welcome up the first speaker from the Affirmative team to open the debate.
When Harvard gives in to the outrageous demands of the Trump administration, they spit in the face of all that they value. They tell the world that Trump's demands are impossible to fight, and they kill the plight of free speech at a tertiary level and beyond. 3 things I'll be doing for you in my speech today. First of all, some setup about how we see this debate playing out, and then onto my 2 substantive points. 1, on how this impacts change and the ability to educate people throughout the world, and particularly at Harvard. And then secondly, the effects on minority groups themselves. But first of all, some setup. So first of all, why is Trump doing this? We believe there's a massive political incentive for Donald Trump to do what he's doing now, to institute these demands. Why? Because this is what he campaigned on, right? He's appealing to his primary base of support, who are inherently against like culture wars and against quote-unquote woke rhetoric that we see. And we also see that left universities are predominantly left-leaning themselves, right? So they're primarily against his political views and his political standing. So what do we think his demands are? First of all, we see them like eliminating DEI, but also in things like auditing. What is the impact of like auditing educational material? First of all, like it seems like changing economic educational material to align with the values that he proposes and the views particularly of the government at the time. Additionally, what do we think American values are? What is he trying to give onto these international students particularly? We believe they're things like nationalism, they're things like capitalism, they're things like conservatism, which he wants these international students to have. And how is the uni fighting back against this? And how's the uni fighting back against this? It's primarily through like legal challenges we see through the courts, but also in the garnering of public attention, international attention especially, in order to get public support for this. And then finally, why do we believe that this is setting a precedent for the rest of the world? First of all, we believe that people look to Harvard as the best of education. It excels in almost all forms of education. It is seen as like the dream place you want to go. So we believe people also are replicating these methods and what is happening in Harvard regarding its policies, particularly of education. And we also see just generally, it's one of the most powerful universities. If Harvard isn't willing to stand up to the US government, we don't believe it. Other universities, weaker universities with less power, with less influence, have no reason to do the same. I will take that POI. Sorry, I didn't quite hear that particularly, but I'll take another POI later. So on to my first substantive points. So what do we believe? There's less capacity for change and there's less impact of change. So context for this is, again, people are looking to Harvard for change. And we'll prove to you in this point that by implementing Trump's demands, there is harm for Harvard's ability to change and to educate, and that's going to, like, again, due to this precedent, affect the world as a whole. So how do we prove this? Firstly, we prove this because we believe, like, through these audits, there's a less of capacity to speak freely and to educate how you want. We believe that these audits are forcing the curriculums to align with the government's views, and we believe that when you're not aligning with these views, most of the things that Trump disagrees with are associated with these that are considered woke, for example. What do we believe the outcomes of this are? What do we believe this means? It means we get far less nuance, we get far less perspectives, and we get ultimately far less controversy. What are the outcomes of this? It means that we believe we get less development and less perspectives of ideas. And that means classrooms and students inside these classrooms attending these lectures, engaging in these, will be less empathetic, they won't be understanding the world as much. And we also believe we're going to get less studies on important issues that are considered woke by the Trump administration. Things like the gender pay gap, things like climate change, for example, are things that they're not going to be pursuing as vigorously, but we also consider to be very important in this debate. So the outcomes of this is we're not addressing really important issues that the Trump administration are not wanting to be addressed. And so we believe this isn't conductive for good debate, for like a good debate and like a good way of politics in the world, because we believe that Harvard is one of the main contributors to these studies. And secondly, we believe due to this less protest, we get far less accountability. We believe that inherently protest is a way in order to keep the government accountable. We don't believe that voting is the only way in the government is held accountable, because often people do end up like forgetting what happens 4 years ago. They focus on like the initial economic things that are happening at the moment in time, or what has dominated the news lines in the first one to 2 years when they're voting. So we believe that stuff is happening now isn't going to be as remembered. But we believe that protest is a way in order to keep the government accountable and doing what they need to do. So for example, when we're losing this protest, we're losing this ability to be accountable. What we're doing is we're giving the government the ability, the Trump administration, to basically do what they want, because they do not have that incentive, they do not have that ability to keep to task. We do not believe like the media are going to be able to do this to the same extent if the people aren't addressing their opinions and like putting that into the media cycle, into the news. Yes, I'll take that, POI.
What does DEI specifically look like, and how does it change?
Well, I'm actually going to explain that when we get onto my second point about the effects on minorities. But we believe, like, just generally, it believes like things like scholarships, for example, programs in order to get more people into these positions who couldn't normally do it. So finally, and the third reason why we believe we get less capacity for change is that due to this like less diversity of opinion, things like less quotas, like less scholarships, for example, less like meaning you have to get people in here, we believe we're losing different perspectives as to why different perspectives inside the classroom, inside education as a whole at Harvard. So first of all, we believe that like generally the students are going to be getting on less with each other and certainly less with people of different perspectives. The outcomes of this are like when they go, for example, into government, as many people in Harvard do, or they go into like lawyers, or they go into workforce, if they go overseas, they're not able to like compute those things. And particularly when you're talking about the United States and like its foreign policy, it's very important. If they're not able to understand those perspectives, we see that increased opportunities for conflict. But we also believe that like inside the classroom, inside lecture theaters, inside these universities, the ability to have more perspective, to have more debate on these issues is also vitally important. It gives people those skills of critical thinking to be able to analyze perspectives and where other people are coming from, and open-mindedness. We believe that's impacting education when you're taking that away and you're getting less of these skills. So why do we impact this a lot in this debate, and what are the outcomes of this? Why do we weigh this highly? Because we believe that if we've got less people, we're getting far less, what is this? We believe that generally, even if you are losing the money, as we believe, like losing the money that you're getting for these universities and for these funding, you're still losing the core ideas of Harvard and how Harvard operates as an educational system. You're still losing the value that Harvard gives you. So we see that like at the very least on either way, it's going to be symmetrical. But we also believe that if we've got less people, if people following these precedents, there's going to be far more impacts to the rest of the world as a whole if people are, again, like following Harvard, as we're going to keep on doing. We also believe like we've got less positive change going out into the world through these educational systems, less things like these gender studies and important studies such as that, due to this less questioning. So very quickly, on the effects on minorities, so we believe the context is they're currently underrepresented in government. And we prove in this point that like these vulnerable, historically disadvantaged groups are going to be far more impacted by this. Firstly, how do we prove this? Firstly, we believe like DEI is an important way in which we get more diversity in our Harvard, for example. Scholarships and programs, things that I already talked to you about. It gives more diversity from the brightest of people from these disadvantaged communities who wouldn't normally be able to get there. Firstly, this does give us like more diverse points of education, outcomes I previously explained to you, but we also believe like it gives those people who cannot normally get there a leg up in life and a leg up in society. It gives you like a wider scale of people. It means you get like, for example, more black lawyers, more female lawyers who normally aren't able to do this. We also believe like the replications and impacts on communities as a whole. You see people in your community doing well, getting forward. They're more incentivized to work harder, to break through these barriers and ultimately getting more representation, for example, in the halls of power. And we also believe, secondly, like less protest and less ability to express it. Ultimately, protest is a way in which you hold the government accountable, and particularly how minorities express their views. So ultimately, we believe there are going to be disastrous impacts on minorities, the most vulnerable people who we need to be looking out for in this debate. But additionally, we believe that overall, Harvard's ability to affect educational change is heavily impacted by this, and ultimately, that is why I'm proud to affirm.
like to thank the speaker for their speech. In between each speech, I'll be introducing a member of the panel of adjudicators. First of all, we have the Chief Adjudicator of the New Zealand Schools Debating Championships, Harper Smith. Harper was previously on the New Zealand Schools debating team in her time as a school student, but she's also a winner of the Joint Scroll, twice a winner of the Joint Scroll in 2024 and 2025. The Joint Scroll is New Zealand's oldest debating tournament. And one fun fact is that I was actually a coach of Harper when she was a school student. So now she's much more successful than me, but I like that I played a small part in that. Harper is also on the New Zealand women's lacrosse team, so she's multi-talented. All that said, I'd like to welcome up the first speaker from the negating team to open the case for the NEC.
At the point at which we're able to flip F's material on benefiting students and minorities, we win. 4 things to do in this debate today. Firstly, on rebuttal, secondly, on framing, thirdly, on students, and fourthly, about research, right? So moving on to rebuttal, note that most of this will be integrated throughout my speech, but then on the general push of students, right? Even at the point which they try to say values are really important and everybody looks towards Harvard for change and a pillar of standing for what's right, we think that at the point at which they lose huge amounts of funding and they're not able to research on the topics that matter most and incite the most change in our society, that help the most number of people, we lose that, and that's incredibly important. Something that is like a harm that F has predominantly not been able to mitigate on their side, right? Moving on to my point about how students are harmed, right? Firstly, for context, we think that it's beneficial to students to attend Harvard. We care about young people getting into Harvard because this creates more opportunities for them. 3 reasons why. For the poor, firstly, Harvard gives huge amounts of scholarships to middle and lower class people, right? This means that we think that a lot of these scholarships have huge amounts of money, up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. These contribute to fees. These contribute to accommodation, course fees, living, and travel. This means that even though if our Harvard has a lot of unrealized assets, they still require a lot of government money that's cold and hard from their exempt status in order to allow these students to attend. Note that this is particularly important in this debate, right? Because middle to low class people are the largest and most vulnerable people in this debate. I think that once you benefit them and they're allowed to attend Harvard, their lives change, the lives of their families change as a result, and it's beneficial to everyone in society. But then thirdly, yeah, I'll take a POI.
Does the speaker recognize that there are always going to be successful alumni organizations and non-governmental organizations?
Look, I've already explained why it's the most beneficial if they're able to get large amounts of money from the government themselves. Once you get these small amounts of money from alumni, I don't think it's that beneficial or large enough. I've already explained why this is. But secondly, on international students, they can't afford to attend Harvard due to the refusal to comply with Trump's orders, right? What this means is the current students that are attending Harvard have to A, go to other universities, or B, just transfer out of the country. We think this is particularly harmful because this means that the young students that are going to Harvard, that have uprooted their lives to move overseas to study from places like New Zealand or China, are really unstable in their conditions. What this means is that they're prone to more harm. And then secondly, PhD candidates who've spent a decade of their life dedicated to their research and developing it have to leave these studies unattended, and they leave all of this great material. Right. But then thirdly, on uncertainty, any current or potential students face uncertainty, right? They may not be able to study at Harvard, a university that's extremely prestigious, as they've already said, but it's like really uncertain for them to be able to even like attend this university because we haven't complied, right? But then like, why is this important? I think firstly for escalation, once like Trump like follows through on like his threats, the uni is no longer like tax exempt, for example, and it loses out on billions upon billions of dollars of funding that gets frozen every month that you refuse to comply, right? Note that this is a certainty that is unique in that you receive like special attention from the Trump administration, and like you spread like the attention in Harvard because like they care about power and control, and the people we care about and how they're perceived is like they like appeared, and like Yale on the other hand, who has complied, and there's like they have no uncertainty. But then like quickly on like the characterization, right? I think what does complying firstly look like? I think it likely means like very marginal changes because like these topics are very nebulous, right? I think firstly maybe you don't like openly advertise out to scholarships, but you still give them to the people that deserve the most merit, like that deserve to get into them. I think this looks like removing the DEI page from your website. I think this is like something the app hasn't been able to like show to us, this characterization. But then also like what are Trump's policies, right? I think Trump doesn't necessarily want to change like Harvard or uni culture at its core in America. What he just wants to do is appear in headlines and have like lobbying support, right? So that it distracts like all of the public like backlash from like from not being able to provide US manufacturing. Note that also many unis have faced like these demands, not just Harvard. Most of these Ivy Leagues have just done what's better and complied, and like we think this is a stance that we stand for and what like Harvard should do, right? And this is why like Yale on the other hand has complied and therefore faced like no uncertainty, and they're still able to carry on, right? Why is this important? Because they can't focus on because the students can't focus on things like their studies. They think that it's too risky to go overseas, and subsequently they like at NAEG, you get like a massive harm of these students not going to Harvard, not going overseas, and not coming back to their country to spread the knowledge that they've learned at Harvard and introduce them to other countries. What are some of the biggest outcomes of this? I think at the point at which they say they care about diversity and minorities, like and student well-being, they have to comply with the policy. Why? I think why is this? Because they get like, instead of getting some international students on our side of the house, they get none. Instead of getting some diversity on our side of the house, they get like no poor or middle class people attending. We flip their material by proving they get only the elite in Harvard when they don't comply, right? We care about Harvard for like, we don't like necessarily care about like the particular courses, like we care about the particular courses and professors and take available at Harvard. I'll explain more in my second point about research. I think for context, Harvard as an Ivy League conducts some of the most particular high level and large like quality like research that is available right now. I think firstly, this is because like when you don't get like a lot of international or PhD students, that's extremely harmful to the research that you develop. Why? Because most people from different countries have unique experiences, knowledge, and information, and because this arises from an understanding of accessibility around like the world, this looks like, for example, you have like manufacturing products that you're able to like think about more clearly, phrases during like the COVID-19 like pandemic. I think secondly, like you get unique cultural knowledge being spread around. For example, like Bangladeshi researchers who were able to like develop a new lotus silk that was more conventional and sustainable than standard silk. Prior to this, they all came from like they all shared their ideas at Harvard so that they could be able to collaborate and come up with the best outcome. You get like less money to do research, and money's important when it comes to research because you have to pay your professors, you have to buy specific equipment. For example, if someone is conducting an experiment, you require like precision cutting material that's like instrumental for this research, right? And you require large amounts of money. I think that like note that obviously your funds are drastically frozen and reduced because the government is able to do that. I think like, for example, at the point at which they tell you that you're going to be censoring academia, it doesn't even matter because you're not able to get like the most uncontested research. You're not able to get cancer research because you lose out on that. So proud to negate.
I'd like to thank the speaker for that speech. Just for the teams, you have a microphone on the desk that should work for POIs. So you just make sure you speak into that. That will mean the judges are also able to hear. Cool. Our next judge on the panel is Samuel Blackwood. Sam won the National Aotearoa Online Schools Debating Competition held over the original COVID lockdown. He also broke as a judge at the Australasian InterVarsity Debating Championships while he was only 16. He's now retired into judging and debating admin, age only 19, so a very young debating career. I'd like to welcome up the second speaker from the Affirmative team.
I gotta say, I love this podium. I love podiums. What I don't love is suppression of freedom of speech, all right? So let's talk about that instead of podiums. Starting off, we hear three main pushes from the negating team. First on compliance, second on research, and third on students. Now let's start off with this idea of compliance. They would like you to believe that this is only going to be a marginal change. First of all, we don't believe this is the case. Why? Because as we've explained to you, this is fundamentally a bill that ultimatum system that Trump is using to suppress his political opponents, which are the more left-leaning, more higher protesting rate people in universities. Therefore, to actually have an effective suppression, he needs to make sure these policies are being enacted in heavy-handed ways, like government audits that look through things, like stopping scholarships, not just removing them from websites. I think that's a completely unfair characterization, and like pushing back against university student action. But okay, even if the changes that we're actually going to be seeing would be marginal, we still have an incredible change, which is the fear. People want to go to Harvard. It's a big deal to go to Harvard. They put in a lot of effort, a lot of work, and sometimes a lot of money to attend Harvard. Therefore, when they're told that they need to comply with these things, when they are told that in some nebulous sense they need to be American, they go to the extremes because they don't want to lose out on their opportunity. They stop voicing their opinion because they're worried that if they say anything wrong, if they make any wrong step, they could be taken away. That is the kind of precedent we are setting when we say you have to behave in this way to attend this university, you have to be this type of political person to attend this university. That is where we get a lot of our change. Now, we also see that Trump is under a lot of pressure to put in massive change. Why? Well, we see that there's stuff like international pressure. When students protest on volatile international issues, I'm sure we can all think of one, Trump's government is put under pressure to make sure that they suppress these kinds of things. This means there's a massive incentive. There's also a personal incentive. Trump personally dislikes leftist people. He personally dislikes universities and the youth of today, so he personally has an incentive to ensure that these policies are persecuted to the extent of his rather considerable abilities. Now, moving on to this idea of students. So they've told you quite a lot about students. They've told you that they care about the young students and the poor students being able to get scholarship. Within this, we see a rather large push on funding. So let's address this idea of funding. I have 9 reasons why our funding doesn't get that bad. Okay, first of all, on donations. We get more donations from organizations that don't like Trump or that want to support values speaking out against Trump because we are now having a platform as an anti-Trump organization. Second of all, we get donations from a large amount of alumni that really like the university and don't want to see it destroyed. Third of all, we get a lot of the people who would go to other universities in America going to our university because they want to be somewhere they can express their political opinions, because they want to be somewhere where they can have an impact and have this free debate. That means we get a massive increase in paying students. That is going to help us deal with this. Also, we see that Trump cannot persecute Harvard to the point of destruction. Why? Harvard is an international institution. It's an important part of America. People care a lot about Harvard all around the world. It's a piece of history. So he cannot destroy it. It is politically untenable for him to wipe Harvard off the map. All he can do is take and chip away at their funding. He cannot get rid of them. We also have this idea of the fact that Harvard is fighting, right? They're not lying over and dying. That's what the whole point of this is. So we see this through things like the fact that because they have connections, because hundreds and hundreds of genius lawyers went to Harvard, they're coming and defending them. Because Trump's actions go against constitutional American precedents like the First Amendment that talks about the right to freedom of speech and political expression. And because they have international support and international media eyes on this court case, it is very likely that they will be able to fight and win. But finally, let's say this idea. Even if it all goes ahead, even if their funding is reduced, we still get a better world. Why? Because we fight the precedent. We fight the idea that the American government, and Trump specifically, is invulnerable. We fight the idea that they can do whatever they want to education wherever around the world, because America is the leader of the Western world. It's where other organizations look, and when they deal with organizations like Harvard, if they roll over and die, that is what other universities all around the world will do. This is compounding harm, where we see universities in like France, England, being suppressed by the government because they want to build their political support, because they see now that universities are not places of enlightenment, are not places to come together and share ideas, but they are tools that they can use to politically suppress the youth and to create a society that is only loyal to their nationalist ideals. Okay, so now getting on to this idea around students more in general. They tell us about their scholarships. Now we tell you, one, obviously a lot of the scholarships that are made to rise up equitable people are being slashed by this program because it is mostly the poor and lower classes that are against Trump's policies, because they are fundamentally usually the privileged middle-class Americans. So those are the sort of like political things like giving advantages to the poor that he is getting rid of when he talks about getting rid of scholarships. But even if we do get slightly less of these people attending this university, we actually think it's not that bad if this university is going to be tainted by these policies, by this fear, by the fact that they are no longer to receive a nuanced, critical education, by the fact that they are no longer able to foster that sense of education and enlightenment that makes Harvard so important. We think if this drives them to other universities that are better able to focus on that, that is a good thing. That is a net benefit, because fundamentally what we care about is this education, is this enlightenment, and is this freedom of political expression. They also talk to us, before I get on. Yeah.
Are academic journals not like edited over time regardless?
I think that point is not relevant to the debate whether or not academic journals are edited over time. Yes, academic journals are edited over time, so when they edit them, now they'll be audited by the Trump government and they'll be changed. That's a bad thing for your side of the house and a good thing for my side of the house. I don't know why you asked that. Right, now, finally, we get on to the fact that people who are managing to attend this university on their side of the house are the subject of things like hate crimes, are the subject of things like fear, of oppression. This is not a good thing for those people. We fundamentally do not care if more people are attending, if they are not learning, if they are not engaging, if they are not developing critical thinking. That is just creating a more brainwashed society that is more willing to give into these American, fundamentally political values that Trump is trying to push. That is not a good thing on their side of the house. That is not what we stand for. Finally, they tell us that research will lose international support. It won't. Why won't research lose international support? I have a couple of reasons. First of all, they are now the only American university that is still doing legitimate studies, that are still doing these studies on things like the gender pay gap, on ocean acidification, even though it's climate change related. So they are clearly going to be the one that when international universities look to who they're going to work with, they're going to work with Harvard. They're not going to work with Yale or Columbia, who have lied over, who are not doing these kinds of studies. So fundamentally, we're going to get more international support. But also, we see that we are still losing like the majority of research on their side of the house when they are restricted to these American value-based research, when they are restricted to only people that fall in line. And so their studies, they don't even do a study that might have a controversial outcome because they're worried that then they'll be sent out of the university because they still have this fear playing on them. So at the end of all these points, what can we see is the most important? We see that creating a university that is fundamentally a brainwashing organization is not good for everyone, even if more people attend, which they won't. We see that university is forced to comply, we see that fear builds in the masses, and we see that we create a fundamentally worse world. Proud to affirm.
Sorry about the false start there. Our next adjudicator is Jaden Tucker. Jaden has also won a joint scroll. He's been on the Ad Score of the Schools Nationals, and also 2 joint scrolls. And he's judged the last 2 finals of the Schools Nationals. Jaden never did this tournament himself as a student, so we're very lucky to have him, and very lucky that he has agreed to volunteer his time for this weekend. So I'd now like to welcome up Isabella to continue the case for Hawke's Bay.
Harvard University, without the instruction of Trump, has already been cracking down on protests across the university campuses. I don't think it's fair for the Affirming team to come out here and tell you that they are the cornerstone of liberal democracies and leftist policy in America. That is simply not true. What you actually get is you get Harvard becoming an elitist campus. If they care about diversity, then they have to stand for Harvard complying with this policy. Firstly then, on the precedent that you set and the wider impact, what do they tell you? They tell you that basically this impact will spread throughout the wider world, and therefore every university will just sort of be bending to Trump's will. I don't think this is true. Firstly, because there are many other universities of high prestige that simply don't exist in America, right? Like Cambridge or Oxford. But secondly, we tell you that we have not seen a pattern of American Trumpism spreading throughout the wider world. Rather, we have seen the complete opposite in the fact that Canada and both Australia have moved away from Trumpist policies. I think what they probably care about more, therefore, is what their actual governments and actual people care about, rather than one university in America. Furthermore, obviously, they can't travel to the university regardless on their side of the house. Secondly, they tell you that it has a wider precedent and wider impact in that you sort of limit the ability of people to speak freely. I think, firstly, let's just be reasonable here, right? You're not going to be able to have an auditor sitting in on every single course at a university of the size of Harvard. I think they have to come out here and explain to you why they're going to be able to go through the entire syllabus of every single course. Most university students don't even read their entire syllabus. Why is Trump's auditors going to be doing the same thing?
Point of information.
Also, right, the extent at which they're able to create long-term harm is just editing some documents. At the end of Trump's term, maybe you just go back and find the files that you've kept in the archive from a couple of years ago and you change it right back. I don't think they're able to prove that they get widespread or long-lasting change on their side of the house. Secondly then, on the change in the quality of education that you are likely to get. They've told you that you lose diversity of opinion, but I think they fail to consider intersectionality. At the point in which the amount of money that you make is directly tied to how oppressed you are in society and whether or not you are marginalised and your social mobility, I think that when you are less able to go to the university, you're getting less diversity as a whole. But also secondly, right, as I've explained in my introduction, I don't think Harvard is a particularly moderate university. I think it is a particularly moderate university that cracks down on things like anti-war protests. And at the point in which that is true, I don't think that you're likely to get amazing, flourishing beliefs anyway on their side of the house. Secondly then, they tell you that students are going to be less empathetic and they simply won't care. As I've already said, not a very progressive university, but secondly we tell you that they probably don't learn about these things therefore directly at the university and in their classes. If you're learning about something about social justice and a particular minority that your university is cracking down on anyway, where else do you go to learn about it? You probably go on social media, you join clubs that aren't directly affected by Trump, who are still able to have free policies, who still allow students to gather together to share their beliefs and to progress the leftism in society that the Affirming team cares about. But thirdly, uniquely on their side of the house, they become a target. Those who are currently empathetic or care become even more targeted by the Trump administration over time as you continue to push back. I think they failed to engage with our materials sufficiently on why Trump isn't just going to get worse and worse. We think that it is not just going to be existing policies and existing threats that are going to get worse, but he potentially turns to even more policies that you cannot even fathom. And that is the point in which people who care about diversity no longer go to the university because they have no certainty. They don't know that they are even going to be able to complete their degree, but they will spend thousands of dollars in the process anyway. Before I carry on, I will take a POI.
Does the speaker not recognise that when people are afraid to seem un-American, they will not join these groups, they will not talk to these people, they will not find other people because it will expose them?
Why would the auditor know what you just are a part of a club that just discusses law, but it happens to be that within that club that discusses law, you talk specifically about law activism? They never explain to us why you are going to know that uniquely. Furthermore then, on funding and the impact that that is likely to have on the quality of education. I think they tell you a couple of things. They give you their 9 reasons why you're still able to get funding. I think at its core though, right, people who donate to these universities donate because it is tax exempt and they are now able to evade taxes. Uniquely due to Trump threatening to get rid of the tax-exempt status, you lose a lot of those donations because people are elite and just want to make money. They tell you about capitalism and that as an American value. I think you lose that on their side of the house. But also, secondly, when I flag to you that a lot of people historically who attend Harvard are uniquely conservative, have been able to go there because they have a lot of money, who then leave these universities and are surrounded by elitist communities who are not very diverse, these people are likely quite conservative and aligned with Trump's views anyway, and so they aren't going to be backing Harvard all the way. They instead will just sort of sit quietly in the corner and hope that Trump eventually loses the next election. Secondly, they tell you, I think what you would rather do is rather be sponsored, you would rather have the government continue to sponsor you, particularly given you are a public university, you've likely relied on public funding for a long time, and any shift that becomes in such an immediate way as just Trump saying, I cancel and freeze all your funding, you are unable to adjust to in the way in which they regard. I think, therefore, what you have to believe is that we significantly reduce the amount of funding that Harvard is able to acquire, and that has multiple flow-on effects, both for the students who attend the university and that they are no longer able to get scholarships. You then get elitist views of a very few minority who pretend they know what marginalized communities feel like. You also get less ability to abstain critical research. They tell you that no, well, research is just less diverse. As Anshika specifically told you, even the uncontroversial research, like cancer research that saves people's lives, simply doesn't get done because you don't have the money and the ability in order to do that. Lastly, furthermore, on research, I think they tell you that, you still get, international students who specifically go to Harvard, but they fail to engage with the moot at the point in which it literally tells you that you cannot get international students because they've now been banned from Harvard. But even if they try to tell you that, oh, well, no, they're still able to go in some regard, I think because of the uncertainty and the large change you are making to your life when you literally cross oceans, I, as someone from New Zealand, am never going to say I'm going to go to Harvard because my entire life, my funding, my the amount of effort and, sacrifice I have to make, the risk is simply too great. I think you lose all of that diverse cultural knowledge. You lose the amount of minds that are able to make significant change.
Last chance.
Thirdly, then, on protest. I think they've told you that it is extremely important for accountability, but the point in which Harvard is willing to just restrict protests themselves anyway, I think that point clearly falls out of the debate. But furthermore, we tell you that any further restrictions on protests have to align with generally the laws and the justice systems of America anyway. I think that the courts will probably reject any further attempts. Obviously, the Trump administration cannot, Trump just can't walk down to a campus and arrest a student by himself. He has to get a policeman in order to do that, and then has to go through the courts. I think what you're not getting then is a massive crackdown on protests to an any greater extent than Harvard is already willing to do themselves. But fourthly, then, on the changes at the point in which you continue to not comply. I think what we've told you so far, right, is that because Trump is likely to double down on existing threats in order to prevent lobbyists and those around him who are literally funding his political career from getting angry at him. He has to stand up against Harvard and continue to fight until the end because and he gains stuff from that, right? He gets a bunch of billions of dollars back that he can spend on whatever he wants. I think he's likely to continue to do that and continue to push through, basically until Harvard is dissolved into the ground or until they give up. I think what that means is it's particularly harmful for Harvard to continue to put up this fight, and we would much rather they just never started it in the first place.
I'd like to thank Isabella for that speech. Our next member of the adjudication panel is Zach Wong. This is Zach's 10th Nationals. He first attended as a student in 2016, the same year I first attended, and he lost in the grand finals 3-2, if anyone is interested. Zach has won Joint Scroll. We've got a lot of Joint Scroll winners on the panel today. And he also dedicates a huge amount of his free time to doing the debating admin that helps organizations like NZSDC run. So he's the current chairperson of ASD and has been for many, many years now, but it's also helped out at the level of the World's University Debating Council and many other organizations. So we're very, very lucky to have Zach here today. And with that said, I'd like to welcome up Lydia to give the third affirming speech.
Side negating loses this debate when they buy into Trump's narrative that he is an all-powerful deity. They lose this debate when they fail to understand, however, that he also has large influence in America, that he has the ability, because of the way that democracy in America unfortunately works, to silence minorities, to prevent them from speaking, and the best way for him to do this is by silencing them in tertiary education, where their voices are heard the loudest and the most, where people care most about social justice, and where they are most likely to make that impact. That is why he is targeting Harvard. That is something that they fail to understand, and as a result, cannot win this debate. A couple things to get through today. Firstly, just some context. What does Harvard actually look like? Are they actually woke? What does Trump actually look like? And what are the actual implications of all of this on everybody? And then a couple points of clash, firstly on who gets better quality of education, and secondly on what does this mean for minority groups, who gets better outcomes for them. We have a few paths to victories here. One is that we can prove on our side of the house we maintain the education, or if not maintain, we still have a better education at Harvard Law School and more mechanisms for change through our ability to have advancement in science, education, social advancement, that kind of thing, or if we can prove that what they are doing is detrimental for minorities, which we absolutely can, and as a result, they cannot win this debate. Okay, so moving on to this blatant mischaracterization of Harvard. Okay, so they tell us that at Harvard, protests are shut down anyway, and so they must be conservative. This is just wrong. We think that Harvard should be allowed to shut down protests, and they do shut down protests on their campus when they become violent, when they become verging on hate speech, when they see that they actually conflict with the values of progression and liberalism that Harvard holds. That is when they shut down protests. That is a blatant mischaracterization that, by the negating team. We think additionally, even if they are shutting down these protests that kind of align with Trump's values, we think that this is because of the political pressures they are facing. We think that this is because they are walking the tightrope between losing their federal funding and being able to continue to do all the things that Harvard does to be an amazing university. We think that they just misunderstand the motivations on their side of the house. Now, they also talked about what DEE means. They tried to tell us that this is not going to be very detrimental because all it looks like is Harvard taking down the page on their website, not Harvard losing their scholarships. Okay, firstly, we think that now that Yale has given in to the Trump administration, when you go to their website, it is no longer about diversity. It is no longer about the ability of the university to make change on a global scale. It is now just about a bunch of boring academics who, to be honest, nobody wants to read about. Sorry if you go to Yale. We think that also, this is just wrong, right? We think that Trump will make sure, because he has political incentive that we have mechanized already to do so, that the scholarships will no longer exist. This looks like Trump, who has already gone through and removed scholarships based on science in other universities that are based on equity and diversity, and told them that they can no longer provide those scholarships to students in vulnerable communities. Therefore, they no longer have those minority students attending their universities. This is a harm that will exist for Harvard on their side of the house that they cannot mitigate because it is simply true. Okay, so moving on, they tried to tell us that Harvard alums are absolutely conservative. We think that Harvard alums are diverse in their political views, and that is the entire point of this. We think that Harvard has the ability to accept diverse ranges of students from diverse places, and that is why we get the quality of education that we see at Harvard today. That is what makes them such an amazing university, and that is the very thing that they put in jeopardy on the negating side of the house when they allow Trump to have his way and to push his far-right rhetoric at Harvard University, when they give in to Trump and his administration. We think that okay, so moving on to what this means for students. We have this big push about how students aren't going to feel safe at their university. They're going to feel this sense of uncertainty, especially international students. I'll tell you why international students aren't going to feel safe at Harvard. It's when they're experiencing hate crimes there, because Trump has gone through and and change their curriculums. We think that they underestimate Trump's ability to do this when they tell us that it's simply too much. Nothing is too much for Trump. I think that I don't even need to mechanize that. We think that when Trump is like, as convinced as he is that he must push this far-right rhetoric, that Harvard is becoming like a liberal cesspool, that he has a lot of incentive to go through and make sure that they are auditing, make sure that they are pushing the things that he wants them to push at university. We don't think that he'll stop as easily as they think he do. What does this mean for the students of Harvard, especially the international students? It means that they no longer feel free to voice and express their opinions. What does this mean? A, we get a reduced quality of education because we can't have debates like this at Harvard University because they're like professors are stuck teaching certain things. We think that these auditors additionally, they don't understand how these work, right? Because these audits happen because by law, the university must enforce them. So it doesn't mean that a bunch of like evil people from the Trump administration come through and make sure that everyone's doing everything right at the university. It means that the university, like the headmaster of the university, has to enforce this by law when they give in. That is something that they are simply going to have to do. When they talk about loss of scholarships, we think these scholarships don't exist under the Trump administration. We think that even if we have to lose 5 of them, it's better to keep 1. They lose all 6. Okay, when they tell us that international students will no longer be able to attend, we think that at worst this is symmetrical because of a variety of reasons. So what happens when we focus on the domestic students? Right now, we are able to have more diversity in the range of domestic students that we take in. Because we have like a say over our admissions processes. Under the Trump administration, he will be in control of that. He will be in control of like who and when and where we take in these students. This is a harm that they cannot mitigate. When they say that every month, okay, moving on to like what the lawsuit looks like. When they say that every month of refusal is more money lost, we think that every month of refusal is more freedom of speech seen internationally. We think they underestimate the ability of Harvard to spread their case internationally. This looks like the president of Harvard going to CNN, going to the BBC News, telling everybody exactly what Trump is demanding of them, exactly why it is bad. We think this is where they get their international influence. This is where we get like the international claims that we see everywhere. And we think that on their side of the house, they ignore the precedent that they're setting everywhere else in the world. This looks like when we see far-right governments being voted in Europe, they will see that when Trump has like managed to get his claws into Harvard, they are able to do the same in their universities. They are able to spread the same rhetoric. And this means that turns into a global issue, not just a national one. This is why it is so important for Harvard to stick to it. We think that no matter the harms that they can prove to our education system, no matter the harms that they can prove in terms of not being able to take in international students, this outweighs everything because it is an issue of global scale. When we prove that as Harvard fights, people internationally see this and are inspired by it, and Trump becomes less and less powerful by the second, that is where we win this debate.
I'd like to thank Lydia for that speech. The final member of our 5-person panel is Andre Borrow. Unlike most debaters, Andre is a computer science student, and he's actually doing his computer science PhD at the moment on graph theory, so if you have any questions about that, you can ask him because I wouldn't understand myself. He's also, though, used to work as a bird nurse at a native bird sanctuary, so a multi-talented man, also a very good debater. Is there anything you can't do? I'd like to invite up Yuval to give the third negating speech.
DEI doesn't exist, right? I don't think, we haven't heard one explanation of how DEI actually works, what it means for people to have DEI, and what it means for it to be cancelled. I think there's an importance here where we need to be very clear on what exactly changes, because Affirming has been trying to claim massive benefits that are just not feasible because the changes just don't happen when you comply with it. I don't think they can win this debate. 4 things to do in my speech. 1, on making the actual physical change very clear so they cannot claim all of these absurd benefits that don't happen. Secondly, on quickly responding to their point on precedence and why it doesn't apply or isn't important. Thirdly, on the quality of study and what actually gets done. And lastly, on the most vulnerable students and how we benefit them on our side. So what do we hear from Affirming? First, we hear about there are going to be the massive changes because DEI and American values, and it's going to be so important. And then we have a point about Trump. I think, firstly, what you need to understand is that DEI, woke, and American values are so broad that there is no world in which the Trump admin can just say, oh, this is DEI, this is not DEI, you can ban this. I think what this means is that Harvard has a lot of freedom in choosing what exactly it defines as DEI, because ultimately this isn't actually a practical thing. You can't say, you can't legislate what DEI is, right? So we need to be extremely clear about what it is. And we tell you that DEI in general is just the attempt of being equitable, right? And I think what it actually means in practice is doing stuff that is, anyway. Generally, what you need to believe is that because these are so broad, it is extremely hard for them to actually get thing. And I think specifically, we have not heard enough on the comparative or what actually are the DEI measures Harvard has, because I don't think Harvard just gives everyone gives every person from a minority a scholarship because they're a minority. I don't think they just have un-American values all the time just because. I think they needed to explain to you what is the actual change in order to claim any benefit. They haven't done that. They cannot claim a benefit here. But more importantly, I think we need to talk about how Trump acts as an individual, right? I think both teams agreed that Trump is very concerned about appearance. Why does this mean we get the benefit there and they don't? I think you need to remember that for Trump, what actually changes isn't important. The appearance of it is. So if you get the change, if you just comply and nothing happens, then it's a very minute benefit for him, right? He can claim other things elsewhere. He can claim he's getting domestic manufacturing. What happens when you challenge him is that you become the target. You become the person that is harmed. I think what you need to believe is that if you accept the challenge, if you comply, there's just going to be very little pushback on you. So you can afford to make very minute changes, and the Trump admin just wouldn't care because they've already won. So you can get very little harms for the massive benefit we give you on our side. On the comparative, they have to stand for a world where Trump's first primary target is Harvard, and making sure it suffers as much as possible. It means removing as much funding as possible, doing everything in their power to make Harvard either fail directly or seem really bad so other people don't go. This looks like removing their ability to enroll international students, even though it has practically failed in terms of they probably would be allowed to do that because of the massive inconsistency in what happens, because of the massive uncertainty. People just don't want to go to Harvard because of it. We tell you that they have to stand for a massive harm where Trump is directly attempting to make Harvard a very bad university. That is a tangible harm on our side that they on their side that we are able to mitigate. Before I move on, I will take a POI.
So even if we buy what you tell us about Trump not actually being able to make any changes, do you accept what it will look like on an international scale for Harvard to give in versus fight?
So if you've listened to my introduction, this is exactly what I'm moving on to now, the precedents and opposition, right? I think firstly, you need to believe is that Harvard is not the biggest or the most important part of the opposition to Trump, right? People are opposing to Trump regardless of whether Harvard is complying or not, right? Because people have a political opposition to Trump in terms of their values. People don't just decide what they believe or what they want because this big university said that, right? I think what you need to believe is that for most people, this just isn't impactful, right? We've seen that Australia and Canada have voted for left-wing parties directly in response to Trump's rise to power because people don't care. People have an opposition to Trump regardless of whether Harvard complies or not. I think that is just an absolutely absurd claim for them. And I think, even if you believe that there is a precedent and that people might have slightly more opposition to Trump on their side, or that some people would, that some universities would be harmed. I think you have to believe that it is very, very marginal, and we have to win on the other 2 points regardless. So firstly, on quality of study, I think we've heard two big ideas here. One on funding and where money actually goes, and two on free speech. So on resources, I think we've given you obviously when you get funding from government, you get more money. I think that is very simple. That is uniquely on our side, and you have to accept it. The big pushback we hear from negating is that you're going to get more donations. I think Isabella has answered it incredibly well in terms of telling you that the sources of donations change because, one, a lot of people are donating because they believe Harvard is is not a very left-wing institution. So when you make it an opposition, you lose on some sources of revenue, but also on the charitability donation status, so you get less. So you just get less donations because people donate less. But now moving on to free speech, and we tell you that is probably the biggest and best push in this debate. They tell you that you're going to be auditing journals, so you're going to lose out on free speech. One, I think we've already mitigated most of this at Isabella in terms of you obviously can't audit every single essay or thesis that comes out of Harvard, so you can't get a massive harm there. But I think most importantly, the type of free speech is really important, right? Because the free speech we care about is not what my coaches told me to say or not to say at Parliament. It's being able to go and to pay for going to nationals, being able to fly here, being able to speak at Parliament regardless. We stand for people being able to get there. They cannot have that. To quote a word I was told not to say, it is logically prior, right? Because on their side, whether or not you can say something doesn't change, but on our side, you can't say it because you don't go to Harvard, because you don't get a scholarship. Lastly, I think it is incredibly disingenuous for them to say that people don't get scholarships on their side, and that that minority students don't get that. We tell you that obviously people minority students get scholarships anyway because they get it based on merit, not based on DEI or equitability. So it's regardless.
So now we move to the reply section of the debate. So these speeches are only 4 minutes long, and there are no POIs. We also reverse the order. So please welcome back the leader of the negating team.
A couple things to talk about in this speech. Firstly, on does Trump continue to care once you actually comply with the policy? Secondly, on your ability to enforce it. And then thirdly, on how it affects education and research. I think firstly, on does Trump continue to care once you comply, with the policy. I think if you believe that he doesn't, then we should just give up and we should stop now, because we will cop fewer harms as a result. It is not worth losing funding and losing people over the fact that Trump will simply cease to care. They say that he hates diversity and therefore will continue to fight a battle once he's already won it. But what they've also told you is that they will have no auditors in the university, and so we'll never know what the extent of that diversity actually is. What is more likely is that we explain to you down the line consistently that Trump cares about things like appearances and headlines. He wants to satiate his lobbyists. He wants to focus on his more international and important policy, and he can do that quickly just by getting Harvard to have the headline and say that it is complying with what he says, and he can go and focus on the things that he cares much more about. I think that we have explained to you that this is very similar with his tariff policy, in which he continues to pursue China and the European Union. Rather, what we would benefit from is acting exactly like Yale or Columbia and carrying on with our day-to-day life. On their side of the house, you face more extreme policies beyond what you could even conceive. Secondly, on the ability, they must prove that there is a large ability to enact this policy by Trump, otherwise simply you get no harms, right? I think they've told you explicitly that no one comes through and checks. What this means is that Harvard just decides to. They also have a lot of freedom to decide what that looks like, as Yuval's explained to you. I think what is more likely is that the thousands of courses and syllabuses never get checked, never get changed. You're not policing the conversations that are held in individual rooms, and you are able to pursue your freedom of speech through a variety of other avenues, such as social media or independent clubs, whether tied to the university or not. You still have a lot of freedom as a result of this, and Trump is never able to enact the policy significantly enough that it is going to affect your students, that it is going to affect your quality of research. Lastly then, on that, I think that there are two things again, as Yuval flagged, right? Funding and the social costs. But firstly, on the international and global scale. Firstly, note this is reliant on the policy actually being effective. Secondly, it must have large opposition to Trump across the world, which means that they're not likely to want to implement it, and people just generally dislike Trumpism, which means that you're not likely to face this global spread of the policy. But secondly then, on funding. I think, let's be clear, right? On their side of the house, you lose billions of dollars of funding, and you risk losing even more at the point in which you continue to fight Trump. They try to tell you a number of different mechanisms in order to mitigate this, but they also fail to understand that the people who donate are primarily conservative, who want to align with Trump anyway, and are simply doing it just to evade taxes. I think what you have to understand then is that there is a large decrease in funding to the point in which you are unable to offer the large majority of scholarships which are necessary for people who are of diverse backgrounds in order to attend your university, but you're also unable to fund critical research into very important things that Harvard uniquely does, because they are able to take on that risk and do groundbreaking things that maybe a university in New Zealand wouldn't be able to. And lastly, on social cost. Let's be clear, again, there is no international students on their side of the house. There are very few poor and middle class people on their side of the house. What this means is they have already sacrificed freedom of speech. You must be at the university, as we have said, in order to count, in order to actually make any change and express your belief. They cannot stand for that at the point in which you have significantly less diversity. I think what you have to believe, therefore, is that the restriction on your social expression, on your freedom of expression, whatever it is significantly decreased on their side of the house. At least we get to have a number of different people from different backgrounds from across the world on our side of the house, and I think that is particularly important. But at the end of the day, what do you do? We think that in a couple of years' time, Trump leaves anyway, and we have faced much less cost and much less decrease and much less people not having certainty and faith in us as a university.
And now to conclude the debate, please welcome back the leader of the Affirmative team.
We think on side F, we refuse to go quietly into that good night. I think there are quite a few ways in which we can win this debate. Firstly, one in which we prove to you that under our side of the house, when we stand up to Trump's demands, we preserve the educational quality of Harvard University. Secondly, we can prove to you we win this debate when we prove to you that the most vulnerable students, those who cannot help themselves, actively lose out in this debate. And additionally, we can prove to you just on the precedent alone that if we do not stand up to them, no one else in the world will, and this has far-reaching impacts. But 2 points are class in this debate, and we think the precedent kind of falls into both of them. First of all, what are the impacts on education and on research? And then secondly, what are the impacts on vulnerable students? So let's get onto this idea about what are the impacts on education. Firstly, we give you a massive push about how the educational quality of Harvard is derived from its values and its diversity. We just believe that this is generally a true thing, right? We haven't had a lot of pushback on this, except for some mitigation about the fact that you're going to lose a whole lot of funding from the next side of the house, which dilutes this value of education. We've pushed back on this firstly by simply stating the fact that we get donations, and we'll get on more why we actually do believe we get a lot of donations. But even if you don't buy that, even if we do lose some classes, if we lose some lecture theatres, if we lose some professors, we still believe the educational quality of the Harvard University, the critical thinking skills you learn, the open-mindedness it gives its students, the research that it does for the world is diluted. So the Harvard University just becomes a worse institution under their side of the house. And we're willing to bite a few classes to preserve that quality. We also get a massive push on this about how, we're not going to, around research. Research because of this, and we just simply believe that if you're missing out on years of research on important issues like climate change, ocean acidification, democracy, you could say, gender pay gaps, that is a serious harm to a lot of people in this world, issues that are being ignored, playing directly into what Mr. Trump would like. We also get this push as well that Harvard is not going to get these donations because they're a moderate university. We just don't believe this is true. Given, first of all, why is Trump doing this? Because it's a hotbed of left-wing opposition to him. We just don't believe that generally we believe that Harvard is most likely a liberal institution. So we do believe we are going to be getting this. And additionally, there's just the diversity in the alumni. So we do actually believe we are going to get this. And additionally, so that is one of the ways in which we prove this point, in which we actually preserve the educational quality of Harvard University. Under any side of their debate, we believe that NEG lose that, and we're willing to pay for we're willing to lose a few classes in order to do this. So that is one way in which we prove this debate. Second way we prove we win this debate is in what are the impacts on students. We give you this big push about scholarships and about DEI. We just simply believe about DEI. They say we're going to lose the funding because of this, but again, as I just told you, we believe we are going to be preserving those donations. They also try to claim to us that they are actually going to be able to keep those scholarships. That is simply untrue, right? We believe Trump has the incentive to make sure these scholarships do no longer exist because of that political incentive. We don't believe they can claim those benefits. But additionally, even if we just lose one if we keep 1 out of 6 scholarships, that is one more person that can uplift themselves, uplift their family, inspire their community to do better and to do more for their community against the barriers to their success. They get no people doing that. That is one of the ways in which we win this debate. Additionally, on DEI, and when we're talking about the diversity of students, we just believe there is the fear. If you do not know what you can say and what you can't say, you are not able, even if you are able to go as a diverse student to Harvard, you are not able to access the best education you can because you're under fear all the time of what you can say and what you can't say. You get a worse educational quality because of this, and we just don't believe that a diverse student under their side of the house actually benefits. So that is how we win this debate. The vulnerable students lose out under their side, and additionally, the educational quality of Harvard, that is world-renowned, loses out because of that. That is why I'm so, so proud to affirm.
And that speech concludes the Free Speech Union Grand Finals for 2025. So now our panel of adjudicators will retire to another room to discuss the debate, come to a decision independently, and fill in their ballots. And we'll be back soon with prize giving to announce the winner, as well as the New Zealand team. While that's all happening, we'll have a range of speeches. Unfortunately, our patron, Sir Stephen Koch, is traveling to London this weekend, so is unable to join us, but has asked me to pass on his good wishes to the participants and this message. Today's schools debaters are tomorrow's civic leaders, judges, parliamentarians, professors, counsellors, and legal counsel. Debate teaches us not just rhetorical skills, but the tolerance for contrary views needed to make a success of living well in a complex and demanding society. In the Supreme Court, we can always detect those who appear before us who have been debaters, not just by their forensic talents, but by their generosity of outlook. I very much regret that overseas travel commitments preclude my joining you today. As your patron, I wish all of you success, not just today, but in the years to come. And I look forward to joining you at the Grand Finals in 2026. As well as my impression of Sir Stephen Koch, we'll also be hearing from 3 students from the team, and then also from our sponsors, the Free Speech Union. The first student who will be speaking to you all about their experience at this Nationals is Alan from Auckland.
Well, no, Chief Justice, you'll just have to deal with me. I was really relieved. Beg your pardon? I was really relieved after the end of round 7 because I thought I had no more speeches to give. I was even more relieved when Liam Silverwood asked Bruce to do the speech at the break dinner because, well, of course I would be. But it turns out Schadenfreude really has a special way of sneaking up behind you and then biting you in the ass. So I think that's all the vulgar language I'm allowed to do in this speech. But Bruce did ask an important question at that dinner. Why do I do debating? And I think I finally have an answer. I think I'm speaking for us all when I say we debate to be heard, to express ourselves, and fundamentally to be right about every single thing we say in a debate. But we also debate to meet new people, you know, commercial lawyers, family lawyers, criminal lawyers, barristers, solicitors, and the odd politician we can't forget about, that oppressed minority. We do debating for the 40-minute deliberations where we just stare at the other team awkwardly. And we do debate for that immense satisfaction when Liam Silverwood splits against you twice. Although I think I can only blame myself for that. At the end of this, though, we debate because it's fun. It's fun to defend parenting influences. It's fun to defend separatists and, oh my goodness, ankle bracelets. It's just plain fun. And I think I have a few people to thank for that epiphany. I want to thank everyone I've met at this competition and debated against and shared awkward elevator rides. And I think you all know who you are, the mascot snatchers, the proud wearers of Tarshan, the people who gave me a PLY, which I then proceeded to waffle my way through. And sorry, Yuval, for giving you a PLY at 7 minutes 50. I promise that was not on purpose. Next, I want to thank every member of my team, past and present. There's Auckland White in 2024, who made being locked in the dark recesses of Auckland universities that much fun. I want to thank my Worlds team, where we learned about the Balkan Wars from a street sign. That was incredibly fun, and I can't thank you enough for making that 4 really great weeks of my life. And I want to thank my team in 2025. Apologies to Mishti for my cheesecake cutting skills. Apologies to Joshua for my backseat debating, but this has been a really great time. I also want to thank my coaches, Judy for dealing with my, quote, attitude, unquote, Harry for dealing with my 20-second splits that very much swung the debate in my favour, and Robert Hoskins for just so much. Finally, it's just logically prior. I want to thank my parents and my family, without whom I'd just be a gibbering mess back in Auckland, without whom I'd have no clean clothes to wear currently, and for always being there for me, for caring. Thank you. And so I'll be going back very soon to the trenches of the International Baccalaureate program. PSA for you all, don't take IB. I've written this speech on the back of my extended essay. How sad is that? And so I want to thank both teams for a very wonderful final. I know who I'm rooting for, but know that whoever wins, it will be very well deserved. And just remember, my last thing today, loser gets sent to South Sudan.
Thanks for that lovely speech, Alan. I'm sorry about splitting, but I stand by all my decisions. The next speaker we'll be hearing from is Manuya from the county's Manukau team.
Turo, turo, turo. Kia ora ana koto katoa. Talofalava, maloni, bulavinaka, malolele, and my warmest Pacific greetings to you all. For those who do not know me, my name is Manuya Fox Romia, and I am one of the speakers on the county's Manukau regional team. I feel like I'm starting this speech off like all of the speeches have been said so far, but people start debating for lots of reasons, whether it's to improve their ability to speak in public, or to satiate the need to always be right, or to finally have an excuse to yap for 8 minutes without being interrupted. However, my debating journey started for a kind of counterintuitive reason, being that I joined because I couldn't talk to people. Yes, I joined a debate that's about talking to people because I could not talk to people. Yet somehow it all worked out. It's ironic how professionally arguing can bridge us together, how oftentimes we're fighting on the same clash, how sometimes, as Mr. Went from De La Salle says, win or lose, it's about the journey. And as time has progressed, and I finally understood what a mechanism was, and I stopped using the word concede wrong, my purpose in debating suddenly became a lot larger than being able to talk to people, but being able to stand for people. I started high school debating in a cramped classroom with 7 members in total. I stayed late nights with our partnering all-boys school, De La Salle, living off of Meiwa takeaways in the middle of the night, and lost every single debate in junior opens in a row. And now I'm leaving my high school debating journey here, on stage, at Parliament, at Debating Nationals, in front of probably the most intelligent set of young people in the country, whom Year 9 me would probably be trembling in her boots over if she knew. And I will leave my high school debating legacy with a message for my region of counties Manukau and of South Auckland. To every young scholar in South Auckland, I want you to know that you belong in these spaces. You're not defined by the narratives that the media or other people instill into you. You are not any less intelligent or any less knowing for not knowing what an equilibrium is or knowing what tax is and how that type of stuff works. For it is the knowledge that you hold within your siva, within your language, within your talanoa, that truly give you power. I te tei mei mua, kua riro tō tātou peo tupuna. Te rangaranga I roto I te kara tuke tuke, te pati ia mai. Me mua tanga ana mai, ki tera uki, ki tera uki. Translating to, there was once a time where the transferal of knowledge was woven in between colorful fabrics, where the transferal of knowledge was done through oratory and passed down on from generation to generation. Oratory is in our bloodlines. It's in the way we use talanoa to preserve our legends, our stories. You belong here. We all belong here. And I just want to thank a few people who have really helped boost my debating journey. I think, I really don't want to use the word logically prior, but the logically prior people to thank would be my community. Mr. Went, Mr. Le'a, I don't have a debate team at my school, fun fact, and yet I still am here because of both of those teachers who have pushed me. To my original debate team who left in year 13 and left me without one, Taku, Bakeo, and to all of the boys at De La Salle who continue to inspire me and push, the narrative that we belong in these spaces. Thank you so much. To my teams, to Cadell for, I guess, always stealing the food in my room. To Jenny, to Juan, to Joel, to Liato, to Alex, to Steve, to Ant, you guys truly inspire me and make me want to become a better debater, not just for bragging rights, but, so that I can stand by you and so we can, hopefully achieve more wins in the future. And to all of the coaches that I've had over the years, to James, to Alan, to Tino, to Gabe, to Rob, to Luca, thank you so much for always supporting us, for always pushing us to be better, for always, telling us reassuring stories about the time that you blacked out at World Schools Debating for 1 minute. Thank you for reassuring us that everything is going to be okay and that our imposter syndrome is sometimes validated. And to everyone here, if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this speech, it is this. Unlike my Year 9 assumption, debating is not a sport of professional arguing, but one of community, of understanding, and of empathy. Because oftentimes, though we are listening to respond, it is often better to listen for the sake of just listening. And it is important to use our vulnerability, to use our background, to use our experiences and our upbringing in our speeches. Because at the end of the day, economics is important, but our values, our integrity, and our principles are what make us who we are. Mitaki mata.
Thank Nur for their lovely speech. And our final student speaker will be Shay from the Otago team.
Like what you've done with the place, by the way. It's very regal, isn't it? All right. 3 things to do in my speech. No, just kidding. Yeah, I'm Shay, known by some as Shay, known by some who know me better as Shay McGivern, known by most as the funny Irish guy from the Otago team, right? Really here filling out NZSDCs and continuing DAI tick boxes, right? So, what am I going to do? I'm just going to talk to you about my experience in nationals, and I might not have as many rhetorically powerful and eloquent things to say as the previous 2 speakers, but we're just going to have a wee yarn, and we're going to see where it goes, and maybe we'll learn something along the way. You never know, right? So, how did I end up here? It's kind of like a series of accidents, really. I went to regionals in 2024, and the coaches did the thing. I don't know if you guys have your regions where they do the thing. They go, hey, Shay, could we talk to you for a wee minute? I thought I was getting disqualified. I genuinely thought somebody had made an equity complaint or something, and I was done. I was, as the previous speaker put it, trembling in my boots, thoroughly. I then realized that actually I was not getting disqualified, but quite the opposite. I was getting put in the regional team. Immediately, I was relieved. Ah, yes, what a relief. Then, that sentence just kind of kicked in my brain. Oh, I'm in the regional team. And then I started trembling in many, many more pairs of boots for about the next few months. Why was I so worried? I think obviously it's like worrying because it's a performative thing, right? There's pressure on you when you're especially up here, performing like this, like these 2 teams have and like we all have. But I think it's also, for me, it's a debating tournament. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be this real, high society. I thought everybody would be really fancy. I'm just this wee Irish guy who throws in a few jokes here and there, and I thought I was just going to get cooked by the most, uptight, fancy people in the world. And even though I like to be proven right in debates and in normal conversations quite often, in that case, I was very, very lucky to be absolutely proven wrong. Right? My experience with nationals was great. Everybody, even if they were the most serious-looking speaker in the world when they were debating, they were so nice afterwards. And I just think that's so great, right? Again, everybody always says, oh, it's great, it's not about the debates, it's about how many people you meet. And you go, yeah, but that's absolutely true, right? That was the most important thing to me. And that carried through last year at Nats, that carried through, right? Even if it was just every single round when we progressed to the next round and Samuel Mitchell would just be so upset because he wanted to stop debating and have a nap. Oh, bro, no, not more debating, right? And so absolutely, through the classic Otago bench conversation where they tell us that breaking is all sometimes a bit of luck when they've actually backtabbed us and they know that we are not going to get through, right? Never going to let Tony live that one down, but hey, it worked out in my case, right? And so I think, yeah, like all of this, most recently this year, tricking both of our reserves into eating a whole bit of butter raw at the formal dinner by convincing them that it was a team tradition, when in fact only one person had done it before. These kinds of things will stick with me forever, I feel, right? But also, like, as the two people previously to me have done, right, it's important to acknowledge the people involved and, like, thank them. I know it's a bit weird. It almost feels a bit like the Oscars, like, turn on the music, get this guy off the stage, he's thanking too many people. But I think it's really, really important. So there are a few people I'd like to acknowledge. Firstly, Chris Bishop, right? Notably, after finals last year, Chris Bishop came up to me and he said, Shay, you are a very, very funny speaker. Never lose that. So no matter how washed I get at debating, Chris Bishop will always be in my corner. And I appreciate that greatly. Secondly, to all my coaches, right? Last year and this year, just permanently, always. They're so, so important, right? For all the times that Jordan would tell me he had no positive feedback for my speech, right? All the development opportunities I got from them. Without any of our coaches, we would not be the most intelligent group of young people in the country. We'd all be washed and we'd all be really dumb and we probably wouldn't know anything, right? Our coaches are so, so important and mine are no exception. Maybe someday, guys, I will finally learn how to respond to the speaker immediately before me. All right, next is Clara, who I know is here and has been thanked by like quite a lot of people, so I apologize. But I think, like Clara's own relationship with mandarins, I think just one more couldn't quite hurt, right? Debating with Clara last year was probably like the most inspiring thing to me as a speaker ever. Like just being in the team with her, and she would just demo anything that walked within like a 5-foot radius of her. Was incredible. So, so inspiring. Even though she betrayed us, moved to Auckland, and then started coaching Bop, right? I think that, don't do this, man, come on. That inspiration still stands and is still like so, so important to me. So thank you. Then, of course, to my team, right? My team this year. Anybody who's ever debated with me full stop and has had to like carry me through an econ motion where I struggle so hard because my mathematical ability is just nil. Like the one in round 6 where Alan Chen just absolutely murdered me and cooked me on the stand with his like leader's reply with he showed all of his eloquent knowledge, right? These people are so, so important to me. And this part of the reason why you have so much fun at Nats, right? Because your team are obviously cracked at debating, but you have the crack as well, as we say in Ireland, right? You have a good time, you have fun. I want to make a special mention of Beth on my team, right? Because she's year 11. And I know personally, being a year 11 at this thing is really hard. It's really scary. But Beth herself is also really, really scary, right? The amount of pens I've had thrown at me in trainings is, you know, it cannot be counted. And so I just want to issue, not necessarily a thank you, but a warning to everyone else. That, firstly, duck. Secondly, be prepared, because she is going to be absolutely cracked in like only 1 year. It's crazy. Everybody who spoke at the finals, like this is not easy. Like debating regularly is not easy. This is hard, right? There's a microphone there. It feels really official. This feels like America's Got Talent with the water and stuff. Special thank you to my goat, the roommate that me and Ken have had the whole tournament, Yuval. This guy's great, man. And the whole Hawke's Bay team, because we've seen each other like 2 or 3 times in the exact same room in a row, we've gotten to know each other quite well. This guy's great, all right? If you ever have the opportunity to stay in a hotel room with him, I guess, he's great crack, as we say. So I've done my funny thing, and I feel like everybody else has said something like really, really inspiring. And this is the best that I could come up with. I think from being in nationals for 2 years already, the thing that I've like learned the most that stuck with me is to avoid demoralization. Because debating is a thing that's like, you're just not going to win every debate, right? Even if you debate your absolute ass off, that's my one vulgar comment, thanks Alan, right? You are not always going to win. But that's not the point. As Rocky says to his son in Rocky 6, it's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. It's about how much you can take and keep moving forward. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how winning is done. Thank you.
Thanks for that lovely speech, Shay. We will now be hearing from one of our sponsors. So this grand final is sponsored by the Free Speech Union, an organization in New Zealand that lobby in support of free speech and free expression. The aims of the World Schools Debating Championships include, in their charter, promoting international understanding and free speech through debating, so we're very pleased to have their support for this grand finals. And so to explain in his own words why they've chosen to support us, I'd like to welcome Nick Han.
It's very tough to follow a series of speakers who are so eloquent, and particularly an Irish one, who is very funny. I am just the money guy, so really, if you're Irish, I'd be the leprechaun with a pot of gold. But I'm not even, in fact, the money guy. I'm just here to represent the organisation that sponsored this event. So my main claim to fame is certainly not, well, it wasn't in the year 2000. I think I'm your contemporary because that was my last year of high school. I was not here at this competition. I was polishing the cheap mags on my Honda CRX and not doing particularly well at school. But I had a very good friend of mine who was here, and I happened to speak to him on the phone this morning when I was waiting at the airport. And I mentioned to him, I said, you won't believe it, but I'm going to be going to the grand final of the New Zealand debating championship here in Wellington. And he said, oh, fantastic. He had been here, and I think he was in the winning team. But he was so glad to hear that we had sponsored this event, and it is a great privilege for us to do this. I want to acknowledge that debating, well, it should be acknowledged, it should be saluted by the country. And unfortunately, this country is more preoccupied with sweaty sports like rugby, soccer and netball. But you deserve the acknowledgement. Debating, though often lacking public recognition, I think is the second sport of kings, the evil twin to chess. Debating is an activity which requires you to suspend your more comfortable personal inclinations and play the devil's advocate. People not steeped in the amoral machinations of such a pursuit will naturally distrust you. Why, after all, would you want to try to see things from a different perspective, albeit for a short while, when you could stay safely ensconced in your own comfortable thinking? But you've got this far with your turncoat sophistry. You might as well commit completely and become lawyers, or dare I say, politicians. I'm neither a lawyer nor a politician, so you can trust what I'm about to tell you. Although I must warn you that I belong to a fairly controversial organisation which basically fights for the right for you and others to do the very thing that you've been doing these past few days. Don't thank me, thank the 115,000 plus FSU supporters around the country who chip in and make this sort of sponsorship possible. Many of those supporters will undoubtedly be your neighbours, parents, grandparents and family friends. They care about your right to speak, even if you still annoy I was going to say the hell, and I guess we're allowed to say one from what I've heard so far. one naughty word. Out of them, we annoy the hell out of them, so I should say you annoy the hell out of them, calling them boomers. I'm obviously not a boomer. But why do I care so much about free speech? Well, 6 years ago, I suffered a stroke. Much like now, I was standing in front of a room of St. Kentigern College students, who I see in here as well. And suddenly I had a stroke. A large blood clot lodged itself in my temporal lobe on the right side. My left side was paralysed, and just before my legs gave way, my speech became slurred and garbled. One of the last things I remember hearing from the students in front of me was a droll lad, who's not here, thankfully, in the front row, laughing awkwardly and suggesting to his buddy that Sir's been doing drugs. Sir had most definitely not been doing drugs. And my life was subsequently saved by an incredible medical team. I faced physical challenges, weakness on my left side, a dragging foot, I forgot how to type, I forgot how to swim, something I discovered only after jumping into the surf over my head. All of which I took in my lopsided stride. However, the one thing which truly worried me, in fact terrified me, was my impaired speech. As you can see, I've recovered this ability for the most part. However, I do carry the scars of being silenced by my own brain. As my daughters sometimes tease, I often get my words mixed up when I'm a bit tired. I speak more slowly and deliberately than I used to. And there is now a bit of my brain about the size of a golf ball, which is completely dead. Yes, I have a disability, so you're not allowed to be mean to me. Not that losing 20 points off a 200 IQ is actually much of an impairment, but you know, anyway. At the FSU, we challenge bad or stupid laws which threaten free speech. Such laws which, along with some very good laws, happen to be made here at Parliament. But part of my role as Education Partnerships Manager is to point to something higher, something above law, principle. Laws, in part, are there to remind us of principle, but they are no substitute for principle. Laws will become as worthless as the paper they are written on if we abandon the principles which inspired them in the first place. I once had the privilege of hearing a judge admit to a court that his reluctant ruling on a case before him would see the law upheld, but justice denied. Law serves principle, or at least it ought to. And that is why I'm here before you. I hope you understand what it is you have. 1 million words a minute, the chance to test out ideas as you engage in verbal gymnastics, the opportunity to take risks, dare I say it, offend. Take this freedom, use it wisely. Do something worthwhile for your country with it, and never forget every generation must rediscover the value of free speech for itself. Thank you.
And it looks like the adjudication panel has returned. So I'd like to invite up Harper Smith, the chief adjudicator of the tournament, to begin the prize giving. We have a range of trophies that you can see here. So we'll be announcing winners of the debate, the New Zealand team, and a range of individual speaker prizes.
All right. Thank you to both the teams that we've got up here today, I guess, but also to everyone that I saw over the weekend and didn't see over the weekend. I've really enjoyed Nationals this year. I feel like the quality and the promise that we have this year in particular is just really awesome, so thanks to everyone. The first set of awards I'm going to announce are for promising speakers. These are speakers who are not in Year 13, who we think showed a lot of promise across the course of the tournament. The first speaker I'd like to award as a Promising Speaker Award is James Blackmore. Do you want to come up here? The second speaker is Michael Cash. And the final promising speaker this year is Pearl Vahi-Bourne. We have an award for the most promising speaker. This year we've awarded this jointly to Oliver Larson and Sarissa Gu. And I believe that we've got a cup for that award as well, so. The next set of awards are for highly commended speakers, and the first highly commended speaker I'd like to announce is Emily Roy. The next highly commended speaker is Jacob Johnson. The final highly commended award for this year is to Shay McGibbon. Excellent. Now I'm going to move on to awarding the reserves to the New Zealand team. So in the event that someone from the New Zealand team cannot attend the World Schools Debating Championship, these speakers would step in. The first reserve this year is Oliver Larson. And the second reserve is Sarissa Gu. I'll now move into announcing the New Zealand team. So these are the 5 best speakers over the course of the weekend who will be representing New Zealand at the World Schools Debating Championship. The first member of the New Zealand team for 2025 is Bruce Sang. The second member of the New Zealand team is Isabella McCaffrey. The third member of the New Zealand team is Alan Chen. The fourth member of the New Zealand team is Sebastian Heinz Schaudre. And the final member of the New Zealand team for 2025 is Sam Allen. I'd now like to invite up Chris Bishop to present 2 of our most special awards for this weekend. The first is for the best, is that for the best speaker? Or? Okay, sorry. The first is for the best speaker of Nationals this year, and that is awarded to Isabella McCaffrey. The final award is for the captain of the New Zealand Schools Debating Team. This goes to not only someone who we think is an excellent debater, but who has shown a wide range of other skills like leadership, compassion, and overall commitment for debating. And that also goes to Isabella McCaffrey. And now for the result we've all been waiting for, the result of the final. The panel thought this was an incredibly high quality final. We were really, really impressed with both teams' knowledge on the motion, but also willingness to engage the other team's arguments. In what was a unanimous decision, we awarded this final to the negative team, Hawke's Bay. We'd also like to congratulate for an excellent performance in this final, Wellington Gold. Excellent. Thank you guys very much from the Adjudicator, and we hope that you all enjoyed Nationals this year. And I'll hand it back to Liam for the closing remarks.
I didn't have much prepared, but I would like to echo what I said at the championship dinner yesterday and what Chris said in his own speech earlier, which is that if you're heading off to university next year and you would like to keep up with debating, we'd really love to stay in touch with you. We'd love if you came back as an assistant coach or as a chair or as a judge. This organization is only able to function with a huge amount of volunteer effort, and we're always on the search for more members of the community. The end of your high school debating career doesn't have to be the end of your involvement with NZSDC, and it's just as fun coming back, not as a student. So I'd really all encourage you, if you are going to uni, to stay in touch, keep debating, because it is a fantastic skill to develop. But I hope you've all enjoyed Nationals 2025. If you're a returner, if you're returning again next year, I'll see you hopefully again in this room same time next year. Otherwise, safe travels home, get in touch with your coaches to make sure you know how you're getting to the airport, and don't leave anything at the travel lodge. But that's a wrap on Nationals 2025. So thank you all.